Hello everyone and welcome to the... Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So welcome to this panel on blockchain. I think that really there's been a lot that's been happening in Singapore and the rest of the region with regards to blockchain. You know, I mean, you have cryptocurrencies, which has been the main focus of much of the blockchain technologies on the market right now. But really, getting down to it, I think we have got this collection of blockchain experts here to discuss what actually is blockchain. There are members of the audience that I know who may not have that understanding of, you know, you hear this term out there, blockchain, 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 but really, what does it do? You know, what's the benefit for a business to look at that beyond an ICO? And I think we're here to answer some of these questions and to dive deeper into these elements of the blockchain. So I'd like for my panelists to please introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Loi. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Kyber Network. And we are building a decentralized liquidity network that allows people to instantly and easily convert from one token to a different token. So our network can, work with, for example, decentralized change or, many other financial applications to provide liquidity in this application.
Hi, my name is Raj. I'm Executive Director of Trade Finance Market. Essentially what we do is we provide non-bank finance to SMEs to help them finance cross-border transactions. And we've created a range of blockchain tools to help us do that.
Great. My name is Martin. I'm the CEO of Electrify. Electrify is Southeast Asia's first electricity marketplace. And we're also developing a peer-to-peer energy trading platform that allows you to trade power across the whole main grid itself.
My name is Pavel, CEO, co-founder of Bluzelle. What we're building is a decentralized database. So what that means is instead of having all your data that's stored right now in central places like Amazon Web Services, IBM, Microsoft, where you're getting all these data breaches, data leaks, data congestion, Facebook, name it, everybody's getting broken into. We're using blockchain principles and basically spreading out where everything's stored. So just like you can't break into the Bitcoin blockchain, using those principles to store all and manage all your data. So we're the new Oracle.
I'm Eugene. I'm a head of and VP engineering of Acronis. Acronis is a data protection company. And we have a new company which is called Chainstack, and I'm a CTO in Chainstack. It's basically a managed blockchain service for enterprises. So what we want to do is to simplify all the friction which comes with the technological aspects of building with blockchain for the enterprises.
Now, just as you're building a building, you lay the concrete foundation. And all of the companies all make use of blockchain. So really, at a foundational level, what is the blockchain? I mean, in simple terms for the non-technologists, how you explain the blockchain? What is it? Let's start from there, perhaps.
I think blockchain is a protocol that allows people to work together without trusting each other, and sometimes without even knowing each other. And the way blockchain can enable this is because everything on blockchain is transparent and verifiable. So that's why when you see something bad, you can accuse the other guy for doing the bad things. And secondly, blockchain is secure by, first of all, cryptography, right? Because it's very hard to fake private key and fake the hash function, for example. And secondly, it's powered by incentive. Like if someone is doing something bad on the blockchain, you can easily penalize him because of that bad behaviors. And if someone is following the protocol, then you can also incentivize him by giving him reward, for example. So that's my short definition of blockchain.
I think at the essence, blockchain is just essentially a database. And the property of the database is that it's spread amongst several participants. And every participant in that database structure needs to validate the entries and the transactions. That, I think, is blockchain at its simplest definition.
So, I mean, starting from a database, everyone has been, we've seen the ICO craze of the last few quarters. I mean, last year was the year of ICOs. And even now, you're still seeing a lot of ICO activity in the market. But beyond that, how is it relevant to industries? Does blockchain cut across every vertical as a technology, or is it relevant to every industry out there in the market? Is it relevant to, for example, healthcare, or even a supermarket? How could a supermarket integrate that? Is it relevant to all of these?
No, you go ahead.
That's a good question, really. Personally, I think blockchain is applicable in a lot of scenarios, but I wouldn't say it's applicable to every single person. They would use it, but for example, if you're frying, say, fried rice in a rice stall, for example, you wouldn't use blockchain to fry your rice better, right? But you would be concerned about the source of your rice. That could be tracked on blockchain itself. We get asked this a lot because we're in energy space. So we get asked this a lot, like how does blockchain impact the energy space, for instance? So that's actually been a very big question. So what we do and what we've seen is how blockchain can be applied to like tracking the source of energy, for instance, provenance. The core space like in Asia where there's not so much deregulation, it's not as apparent. And places like where the markets are very heavily deregulated already, like Europe, Australia, for example, a lot of consumers are very interested to know the power I'm paying for. If I'm paying a premium or I'm getting a savings, is this really green? Is this power truly from a solar energy, a solar farm, or is it truly from the source I'm expecting it from? So that's actually very, very important. And that's where blockchain plays a huge role in tracking provenance, for instance, and that's, yeah, very, very key.
Yeah, I think to add to that is any industry where you're always wondering, what am I really paying here and what's the real value? So let's say electricity for one. Insurance, people are always doubting, oh, why is the premium so much? What if these people like I'm from Canada where people do a lot of insurance fraud on small things. So that increases the premiums of everybody else. So why am I suffering for that?
Yep.
So anything where there's like, you as a consumer figure, what's really going on behind the scenes to drive that value? So that's key. Other ones right now for us, like the space we're focusing on is the internet. Basically, it's really centralized. When the internet was originally created, the security protocols weren't built in, and now we're suffering because of all the data on there. How things are managed is just inefficient. So building a decentralized internet, so that's at an infrastructure level. So we're solving it on that area. But like I said, to sum up, I think anywhere where you think there's supply chain, electricity, healthcare, insurance, what Loi's doing with like decentralized exchanges, anywhere you think there's a middleman of mistrust where people have just, done wizardry, waving their hands saying it costs us much, that's where blockchain can apply.
Yep.
I would also add from a slightly different perspective. So when you have a use case, when you have transactional like operations, for instance, you transfer value from one entity to another, then you can start thinking whether you need blockchain or not. If you don't have a transactional operation level, then it's not very useful to think about blockchain because it's very powerful when you transfer value. Then there are a lot of nice pictures in the internet when you can understand whether you need blockchain in your project or not. And the major two pillars that can generalize all that is that you have a few writers to your system. So you need to have a certain decentralization of the governance of your system. So you need a certain number of entities that are actually joining the network. If you're just the only entity, that blockchain is completely useless. You just better use a regular database. And so these are the major things that I think are important. So you need to have transactions, you need to have several writers or several users in the network, and obviously you need to have some parties that are not very trustworthy, and you may trust them to some extent, but not 100%. And that's what you want to secure with a blockchain network.
I can just add one thing, right? Something that we bring up a lot as well. Blockchain's not this magical condiment that you sprinkle on stuff and instantly it gets a lot better. It's not. There are a lot of specific use cases for blockchain, and even Vitalik talks about this. There are many situations where a centralized system still functions a lot better, a lot more efficiently as well. So blockchain's not a magic condiment you sprinkle on stuff. It's not.
Now, following on to that, I think a lot of blockchain companies have recently conducted ICOs, but a lot of these blockchain firms that raise funding through the ICO, very often they are pre-revenue, pre-product, and then when they go to market, for instance, I'm not going to say any names perhaps, but how does a company move from that stage of when, say you've raised a significant amount, $80 million in an ICO, how do you then move from that, translate that funding into an actual product and build traction in the market, given that, there are a number of people, if I were to invest in an ICO and then after perhaps 6 months to a year, I don't see that in the market, I would be getting very concerned about the company.
Yeah.
How do you go from the ICO into the market?
that's no different than any other startup or any other company, right? You got to still do good marketing, customer acquisition. It's startup 101, right?
Bingo.
Everything's done. So rules haven't changed.
Yep.
If you're an investor, the good thing about at least the good ICO companies, they tell their roadmap and they say, hey, this is all R&D. We don't know when this stuff's going to take off, but you're betting on the future. So it is the investor up to them make their decision. If they think that, hey, this thing should show a profit in 6 months, then, I mean, Dropbox didn't do that, Facebook didn't do that, so you have to have the same expectations.
Amazon didn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note as well, same thing, and we talk about this with a lot of other people as well. Even some people who are coming to ask us about, say, what's it like being an entrepreneur and everything else. And we always say the same thing. You got to be absolutely focused on first dollar in. Just because you run an ICO or you raise funds on the blockchain or whatever the mechanism is, right? It does not change the fact that it's a startup. Mm-hmm. It does not change that. You got to be absolutely focused on revenue. Rev all the way.
I think this ties in with your previous question, because if you look at the white papers out there, you have to ask yourself the question, what industries is really suitable for blockchain? And a lot of the white papers out there are basically taking existing business models and trying to shoehorn them into a blockchain type format without actually saying, okay, how they're going to be decentralized, how they're going to leverage the power of decentralization for the benefit of the consumer and so on. So I think that number one is a red flag when you start reading the white papers. And just as an aside, one of the industries which I think is definitely not suited to blockchain is banking. Just coming back to your previous question, because I think the incentives are fundamentally misaligned between the banks and blockchain. Yeah. So it always makes me laugh when you get banks on a panel saying, yeah, we're doing a blockchain test, because it's just not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think...
yeah.
I guess one powerful point in ICO and blockchain is that if you don't believe in the team and the vision of the project, then you can easily get out of the project by selling all of your tokens. So this is very hard in traditional startup, right? Because not many people know about the project, and you can't even find a place to sell your share in the startup.
Yeah. To add to that is the great thing about the ICO is you build that initial community and awareness,
yes.
Right? If you do it right. So you can get people excited, they believe in the team, they help spread the word. So even before our product's out, people are building buzz. If we did that without an ICO, and we're like, hey, we're going to do a data storage company, we're going to be like Oracle, like people are like, yeah, get the F out of here. Like,
yeah.
You know how long that's going to just to convince some people? So at least you have an organic people who believe it and then are ready to push it forward. It's catalyst.
Yeah, but that's already a tricky part to that, because ICO versus venture capital funding has more commitments in advance. So if you do a VC kind of project, then you can pivot as much as you can, like during the timeline of the project, within few years even. When you're doing an ICO, you kind of need to think about many things in advance, and you need to convince people that you will deliver, and you are showing them what you will deliver. So it's much more complicated to pivot, to change your path, because as a result, you may have a completely different model that people didn't like in before. So that's a bit on a tricky part. So you need to commit to many things, and you need to be sure that you will deliver. But absolutely agree that it's a typical startup, so you need to do all the typical startup things, same with the ICOs.
Yep. Now, we've talked a bit about the startups, but you've also mentioned the use of blockchain, of people trying to slap blockchain on top of established business models. Now, what would be the real benefit of a company like, for instance, Procter & Gamble or Unilever to incorporate a blockchain, or even a commodities major like Olam? What is the real enterprise value of the blockchain to an established corporate, or even a multinational, yeah?
I think if you talk about a commodity trader, one of the most effective uses of blockchain has, for us at least, has been to stop fraud. So there was warehouse receipt fraud in Qingdao a few years ago, a few $100 million. So for a commodity trader, one of the things that we've actually developed is putting warehouse receipts on the blockchain, where you can actually tell if it's been double financed or triple financed. So essentially, it's getting parties who don't trust each other to work with the same data set and compare values across the data set without actually owning the data and without actually seeing the data. So that's just one clear example I can think of.
Yeah. So like for us was a slightly different aspect of the blockchain. So fundamentally at the base of what makes the blockchain work is a smart contract. The ability to take very complex natural language contracts, stuff like what you're used to, for example, tenancy agreements, or in our case, electricity contracts, actually describe that into the form of a smart contract instead, allowing it to auto-execute. So by doing so, we bring a lot of efficiency to the system. And that model alone allowed us to start developing, designing a peer-to-peer energy trading platform across the national grid based on very complex mechanisms like a CFD, a contracts for difference. So very simply put, right, energy trading across the national grid, people have done it, utilities have done it for decades, but the average Joe, you, me, everybody else, we can't do it because it's too expensive to execute contracts like this. But on the blockchain itself, as a smart contract, we can democratize that process. And that's what it really is. It allows every one of us to have access to this level of technology, which allows us to do very, very complex things at a very, very low cost and a very high transactional volume. And that's one of the big benefits that we're bringing to the market.
Touching on your example of Procter & Gamble and Unilever is logistics. So if you're Unilever or Procter & Gamble and you're selling goods in new areas, you know, the guy can sell it off on the back of the truck. They put fraudulent goods there, you know, counterfeit. So if they can track it all the way through with IoT, the device verifies on the blockchain that the guy's checked off on it, and they can verify, they know that that good was from the beginning, it went from the factory all the way to the end. So that's, for Unilever and Procter & Gamble, that's a perfect example of consumer goods shipping.
So perhaps we've discussed the large corporates. How can smaller businesses, how can the SMEs that underwrite most of an economy benefit from the blockchain? What are some of the methods, what are some of the available options that a small business person can use to take advantage of this sort of security and logistics, I mean, for instance?
Wow.
No, that's a very good question. I think SMEs are not yet touched with the blockchain at all. So currently, we've moved from consumer applications to blockchain slightly to enterprise applications of blockchain, and SMEs are currently, I think nobody is even exploring. So SMEs might be one of the members of blockchain networks, like for instance, if we take supply chain, they can be one of the suppliers and they can actually join the blockchain network. But most likely who will benefit is the big guy who is actually creating this network and managing this network. So if we think about something that can be commoditized for SMEs, for instance, you can timestamp your objects in the blockchain and then you can verify that this object has been created at a certain point of time, and you can prove that you own this object. So some simple things that has been already commoditized on the cloud, etc., can be done on the blockchain with a higher level of security. So if you think about some like regular services on Azure or AWS, and you can think about how do you make them like tamper-proof. So then you can try to apply blockchain, but it's not mandatory, a very good use case, but you can try to do this. For instance, with the object timestamping, there are a few companies who are providing this kind of service. For instance, Acronis is providing a service for trusted timestamping of objects. For instance, if you want later to audit your logs, you might want to preserve them initially. You can hash them and preserve the hashes in the blockchain, and then you have a verifiable transaction log of all these hashes of the logs of the system that you previously did. But that's a very unexplored area, I would think.
It also depends on the use case or what the service you need. Like for example, for us, going on the database layer, our whole goal is a big company like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, they'll pay for the high security, stability, scalability issues that Oracle and these guys will provide. By us doing like the Bluzelle as a decentralized database, we can give that enterprise grade quality at a price at the SME. So our target market isn't enterprises like one of my sales guys asked earlier. He's like, hey, I want to go talk to some enterprises. I was like, they can't even adopt cloud right now. You think they're ever going to do something blockchain or decentralized yet? No, we're going to go after the smaller companies who say, hey, I just need that product, but at a simpler price. So that's what we're attacking. And then if you go on to other things like the businesses that can be built on top of blockchain projects, like, you know, I know Loi probably has a bunch of ideas on a decentralized exchange, how it can give a small business that's probably in the finance space a leg up on competition against the Goldman Sachs in the world. So it's actually more about democratizing and bringing the SMEs to be competitive against the bigger ones.
I think you've raised a really relevant point here. Now it comes down to data. And what we're seeing is that, you know, the last month, I think everyone has been receiving a lot of these data privacy notices from all the various internet companies out there. I mean, just this morning I got, I think, 2 or 3 different emails about data privacy updates. So all of these companies, SMEs and corporates, they have so much data to deal with across both the public and the private blockchain. So what is the challenge there, and how do you address the issue of data privacy across these public and private blockchains?
So I guess Pavel can talk more about the data privacy part, but so the data is available on the blockchain doesn't mean that everyone can read it, right? Because data can be encrypted. And the great thing about blockchain is that it gives the data privacy back to the users. Because if you store your data on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, you don't know how they store it and what are they going to do with it, right? But with blockchain, user can encrypt everything and store the private key locally. And now if I want to share my data with someone else, I can just easily share the private key with the other guy, right? So that is the great thing about blockchain, and everything is transparent. You can track all the sharing as well.
I think it provides an opportunity for SMEs and individuals to actually take ownership of their data for the very first time. Previously, we all had to rely on central registries. This way, we can basically control our data, allow people to access what we want them to see, when we want them to see, only for a specific purpose, and then it can also actually be destroyed after that. So there's no permanence there. And one of the uses is actually on SMEs. So if we're able to onboard an SME, provide all their KYC, AML requirements, they can actually have a token which they can take around to any financing institution that accepts the token and actually leverage that data to get finance.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. I mean, take it one step back as well. Fundamentally, the internet we're used to, I mean, take a look at like WhatsApp, for example, right? Back in the day, WhatsApp wasn't encrypted, for instance. You use a chat, and it's open. There is no encryption. Whereas with blockchain, for instance, the fundamental layer in blockchain itself is encryption. You're dealing with a network, with a protocol that uses encryption right at its core. And that's very, very important. So back to the chat apps as a metaphor, for example. You're used to using certain chat apps that don't have encryption, and you feel kind of unsafe. Who's spying your data, who's listening into your conversations, and so on. Then you move to something else, like maybe a Telegram, for instance, that would have encryption built in. So this is what it means. You're moving to a new layer of technology which deals with privacy. As fundamental core, it's private because it locks it up. That's part of what the hashing does, and it puts it onto the block itself. So yeah, it's private. Like Raj said, you end up owning that data. And I think only now we're getting into a space where the sovereignty of your own data is becoming more and more important. The fact that you own your data, there is value, right? So yeah, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, for that, I mean, that's our whole business now, and we've seen it evolve over the past 6 months. And we're building a set of framework and tools that empower people more. Like, for example, let's say you're on Facebook, you're tired of it, and like, I want nothing to do with this product anymore. Delete my account. Are you sure they deleted your account and got rid of your stuff, right? They might just still keep it, sell it, all that. There's no scientific way that they can do it because you have no control. Now, I trust Facebook a bit more maybe because they're a publicly traded company or accountable, but imagine any startup that's coming out and you decide to use it. They still have it and they'll misuse it and sell it for whatever they can. So some of the tools that we're building around using the blockchain is to verify that once you delete the account, it's yours, and they have no access to it, and we can guarantee and verify that through blockchain principles.
Yeah. I totally agree that blockchain brings this transparency and ownership of your own data. So if it comes to the identity, then blockchain is a very interesting solution to look into. But there is another side, and if you think about blockchain as a highly decentralized system, and that's what it is, then you may think about privacy regulations like, for instance, GDPR, which are super strict, where your data is stored and which locations, how this data look like, et cetera, et cetera. So this brings a lot of challenges to these highly decentralized systems. And if you take some permissionless blockchain, and anybody can join this blockchain from any location, this brings some challenges, because if you store some data which can fall under this regulation, that's a bit challenging. How do you manage this? So I think on this point, on the regulations, on the data privacy, the emerging consortium and private blockchains can actually play an important role in this whole ecosystem.
Thanks. So to my panel, I think I'll let you choose the next question, because we've got a very, so the audience has shot us some questions, and I think let's look at the first question is maybe women in blockchain, your thoughts. And the second question is quantum computing will render, will make traditional cryptography, which of course blockchain users, more vulnerable. So which one do you want to take a shot at? Number 2 it is, quantum computing. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, earlier there was a session about how quantum computing will eventually be able to crack the blockchain, which is really, till date, one of the most secure products out there. So, I mean, at this point, it's not going to crack it, but perhaps 10 years down the line, we're going to see something that can crack that security. What are your thoughts on that matter, on this particular area?
Well, let me start, okay. First of all, if we talk about quantum computing, there are different fields of quantum computing that we can actually discuss. There's quantum cryptography, there is quantum computing, and there are multiple other areas. There is quantum, like signal transmission, and they're all different. So if we talk about quantum computing, the actual quantum computer is pretty far away. First of all, and then there's a very interesting aspect of quantum computing that you will be surprised about, that you actually need to program quantum computers. And it's not very trivial. So they're not like typical computers. They're not like Windows PCs and you go and you spawn a Visual Studio and write a program. They're like completely different because they use completely different principles for the computer. They're like supercomputers. That was also on a big wave of hype like maybe 15 years ago. And everybody were like super excited. Okay, supercomputers will solve all the problems in the world. But where are supercomputers now? There are some in a very niche like university kind of tasks that are actually solving them pretty well, but you need to do a lot of work dedicated to this supercomputer, like programming, in order to get this program running. So the same applies to quantum computer with just a bit change that it's completely different. It's much more complicated. So it's a threat, definitely, because for instance, Google has shown that the quantum computing is possible, and they've building it like for a lot of years already, and it shows some good results. But still, there is a lot of efforts needs to be done in order for them to work. So I think we're quite far away from it.
I just want to add a little bit on top of that. So I think quantum computing is still a long way from breaking traditional cryptography. And at the same time, we still have scientists from different places in the world. They are working on quantum-resistant cryptography. So we can just easily replace the traditional cryptography component in blockchain by the quantum-resistant cryptography, and we can still maintain some of the properties of the blockchain.
Okay. I think that's a very relevant question because it brings up a certain theme that I think data privacy, data security. The blockchain can also be applied for cybersecurity and healthcare applications. So what are your thoughts on that particular area, particularly with, for healthcare can be used for patient records, and for cybersecurity can be used to secure IoT products? What's the general take?
I think, once again, it comes down to actual ownership of your data. So this, for the first time, gives you portability of your own medical records to go from one healthcare institution to another, depending on what your needs are, what kind of treatment you need, and so on. I've read that the legacy systems for transferring healthcare records is incredibly inefficient. So if this can...
That's an understatement.
If this can speed things up, then I think the ultimate beneficiary will be the consumer, and also help to keep records secure.
Yeah, that's incredibly true. Beyond just medical records, it's obvious you can take your data with you. Another example that we use quite frequently really is this in the electricity space, for example. When market deregulates in Singapore, for example, end of the year, full deregulation, right? So imagine this, your usage patterns, right, of energy, who owns it? Your consumption, who owns that? The retailer does. But what if you owned it instead? What if you owned your own consumption patterns? You own that data, how well you paid your bills, how much power you used, when you used it, and you could take that data with you, right, to the next contract, the next retailer, and can go to them and say, hey, look at this is proof, right? Proof positive that I'm a great customer, I pay everything on time, I use power when it's cheapest, I'm the best kind of customer you have, you ought to give me a good discount. Now that is an economic value, as opposed to another guy who doesn't pay his bills on time, wastes power, and so on and so forth. And he takes that same data of his to another retailer, asks for the same deal, and the guy's just going to look at him and go, no, you're not.
Yeah, he's bad credit almost.
Exactly, so it's bad credit. And that's relevant. That's absolutely relevant because everything from banking to power to consumption to retail, if there's bad credit in the system, guess who pays the bill? It doesn't disappear. That bill for that bad credit gets spread across everybody. Think about that for a second. So when your bill goes up, it's not because you were a bad guy, he was a bad guy, or he was a bad guy. You're paying that bill. So that's where blockchain can come in and prove that, hey, you were actually a good actor within the system. And that's significant.
So if you talk about cybersecurity scenarios, I would say that they're mostly around data integrity. So as I mentioned, the timestamping of the objects is one of the use cases that can also be used in a cybersecurity kind of background. You can also think about more large-scale timestamping kind of solutions. So for instance, there's a project that are timestamping virtual machine snapshots and images and all other like cloud-related infrastructure. And so you can verify that your VM hasn't been changed from the state that you saw, and you can verify that it was integral. So I think that the blockchain around cybersecurity lies somewhere in the data integrity, and that's where the majority of use cases are actually present.
Now, I think we've reached a stage where I think let's look at the blue sky question out there. Everyone has heard of decentralized autonomous corporations, and these are basically corporations that will run autonomously on, based on smart contracts. Now, that's one element of blockchain. Now, how is that? But that also is convergent with developments in artificial intelligence and in automation. So, what impact will that have on the blockchain sector? I mean, there's so much convergence nowadays. You have, for instance, Grab going into payments and even launching in all sorts of businesses. So, for DAC, where does it intersect with the AI and the robotics and the automation? What's the end result? What do you see ahead?
Well, you want to take it?
So before I answer that, I do want to make sure we address the women in blockchain thoughts, because I have some thoughts around that and opportunities.
Yeah, so do I.
So let's not forget that. But for this one, for me, it's AI and everything with blockchain. I mean, to me, blockchain is just another infrastructure layer like the internet.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just the same thing. Like, what would AI do the current internet? What did high scalability do to it? So I don't delineate too much about all these things converted. It's just like blockchain is just an infrastructure to me. It's a protocol that allows for certain things, and AI will improve. And then, then what doesn't matter about the blockchain is the applications built on top of the blockchain and how AI affects those applications, whether it's electricity, supply chain, cybersecurity. That's what we got to focus on, not the blockchain itself, but the applications. So that's where I look at it.
Exactly.
So I think blockchain and AI can work well together. So if you look at the way that AI and all the data mining companies are working, right? They win each other from by having more data, right, than the others, and keep the data private with them. So the company like Facebook and Google, they create better AI because they have more data than the others. But with blockchain, we can create a platform in which everyone is incentivized to share the data and work together on the same platform. So we can create a much better AI, and still people have no concerns that they do not get anything from it, right? Like by sharing data with each other.
I think the next question is about mass adoption. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, this is a bit more technical, but obviously, what steps are being taken to resolve some of the scalability issues that are associated with the blockchain, certain blockchains? And at that point, what are some of the other obstacles that will need to be overcome in order to see further adoption of blockchain-based technologies?
Yeah, okay, can I do, yeah. So it's something that Loi and I were talking about earlier on before this session as well. So in terms of adoption, right? So first adoption, then we talk about scalability. So scalability, if a mass of people going in using the blockchain, then you have to deal with scale, right? Otherwise, it's all choked up. Problem with adoption here really is this, and this is something we talked about like 6+ months ago, right? When I first met him, right? We presented to him at one point, and one of the people in the panel asked us, they said, look, you build all this on the blockchain, you sell electricity on the blockchain, who's gonna come? right? 90+% of people don't know crypto. Who's gonna come? And that's a very, very good point. So for blockchain to reach mass adoption, it's got to be absolutely mundane. You'd be surprised. Guys like the interchanges, Visa, Master, they're looking at blockchain development, but does this stop anybody from using a credit card? It doesn't. What's really important is the use case and the interface, the experience. That doesn't change. It should get better, it should get smoother, it should get easier. But the technology in the back end still works. Like, everybody uses email. Everybody uses chat apps. Do you know how it works? Do you know how TCP/IP works? Do you know how all the protocols work? You don't. I hardly do, and I use it all the time. So that's not the point. The point is that it's got to be mundane, it's got to be easy, it's got to be accepted. It's got to make your life better and easier, right? Then we can talk about the next thing, which is volume. What happens when the volume comes to the system? So there are a lot of research being done right now on blockchain to deal with scalability solutions, right? Everything from sharding to child chains and so on, plasma protocol and such. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
I would summarize actually, and if we want to adopt blockchain, we actually need to remove the word blockchain.
Yeah.
Because like nobody understands what is blockchain, and I would tell the truth that nobody wants to understand what is blockchain. So that's the reality. So just stop talking about blockchain, start talking about what can we do with it and why we want to do it.
Exactly.
So this layer should be completely abstracted for end users. It not only applies to customers, like consumers, but also for business users, because they also don't want to learn about blockchain.
Yeah.
They just want to understand what kind of problems they can solve with blockchain. So while now everybody is talking about the scalability issues, I'll tell you the truth, nobody cares about scalability, the users. They just want to understand whether the transaction will come in 1 second or not. Yeah. They don't care if this system that you use is scalable or not scalable. They just want to send a freaking message on the messenger, it will go through. They just don't want to wait for 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, and how cheap it is, right?
Exactly. So cheap and fast. If it's cheap and fast, they will adopt it. So we just need to remove blockchain from this equation, like silently build everything, all the infrastructure on the blockchain or whatever DLT or whatever technology we want. Yep. And then we just show this cloud kind of like storage is much cheaper, more expensive, and this Bluzelle is much cheaper. So that's the opportunity, I think.
Yep.
I think where we are in terms, and I fully agree with what everyone has said here, and I think where we are in terms of blockchain is where we were in terms of where dial-up modems were at the dawn of the internet. Right now, people, teenagers who stream music don't even know what a dial-up modem is. They just know, like you were saying, what the application is. I want to hear my song. I want to hear it now. I want to send a picture, and so on. And I think that blockchain has the potential to disrupt all sorts of industries by actually making power revert back to the consumer. And I think once the consumers get the feeling of that and the fact that it can be cheaper and that they're in control, I think that's when mass adoption will start. And the landscape of businesses that we see today is going to fundamentally change. A lot of companies that exist today won't be around in 20 years' time. Yep. But that's what I think.
Yep. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, wait, can we address women in blockchain?
Yes, women in blockchain.
We should address that.
Okay, cool.
So my take is, and I'm combining blockchain with crypto, and I don't care if anybody cares or not. Blockchain, crypto, it comes together. If I was a woman, I'd quit my job and go into this field.
Hell yes.
It's 100% blue ocean. It's like, women in engineering itself is huge demand because they bring certain things to product marketing, aesthetics, things like that. But if you look at blockchain and crypto, there's finance, there's sales, there's an entire ecosystem being built that we're all just engineers. Well, I'm not, but most are just engineers. They don't know the marketing, they don't know the product. If you're a woman in crypto or blockchain, even just building an education system that educates masses, because women can start that and be better teachers and caregivers. Like, it's unbelievable if you just forget the tech part about it, like he's saying, and just saying, let's just focus on mass adoption, and that requires education.
Yes.
I'm going to build education courses to teach people about blockchain or cryptocurrencies. Massive business opportunity. And that's outside of just saying women just become engineers. So.
No, that's awesome. I just want to add something as well. So this was related to me quite recently, right? I was just absolutely blown away by this. So I had a friend, right, and Singaporean, and she learned Solidity on her own through a program, get this, right, out of India. So she learned it wholly online, and this blew me away. So there was a program in India, I can't remember the name, you have to Google it. But what the program does is that it teaches women who are disenfranchised to get out of the situations they're in by teaching them how to code in Solidity. And there's a massive demand right now, right? Because heck, everybody who's in blockchain right now, we're all looking for good devs. But the ability to teach someone how to code in a language that's in high demand, and that puts power in their hands. You can build entire worlds out of this, and that's insane. That's incredible. So more people should be getting into this.
Thank you very much, Martin. I
Whatever.
think.
And to back up, our head of research is a woman, and we didn't hire her because she's a woman, but she worked at NASA 2 summers, Amazon 2 summers, highly qualified, masters in crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So, and she's heading research for us in decentralization and blockchain.
Thank you
Gender's
very much.
irrelevant.
So I think we've come to the end of our session because we've run out of time. So
Yep, and
please put
waiting.
your hands together for the panel.